full interview translated between the interviewer and Francisco Alvarez, Valeria's ex. Interviewer, the Secretary of Security Omar Garcia Harfuch directly named you and accused you of having been responsible for the murder of Valeria Marquez, the influencer. He also named you during a press conference where he was talking about your father, R1, following his arrest. Right now, you're basically on the run. You're not living your normal everyday life. How do you feel right now? Francisco says, "Look, honestly, I feel somewhat afraid and personally attacked. Like you said, I'm not living my normal routine right now. I had to leave my normal life because of the accusations being made against me, which I consider unfair. Why? Because it's an extremely serious accusation being made against me, and I'm completely innocent. I have absolutely nothing to do with it. She was my partner. There was nothing that would have made me want to do something that barbaric." Interviewer says, "Let's start from the beginning. When did you meet Valeria? What year? How did you meet her? How did your relationship begin?" Francisco says, "I met her around 2021. She worked in what they call imagen in Guadalajara. That means image. They work at nightclubs and things like that. They are the image of the club." Interviewer says, "Meaning basically they invite people to come so the clubs fill up and people buy bottles." Francisco says, "Exactly, yes. So I met her at a nightclub in Guadalajara. We ran into each other again at another club. And from there, it became, give me your number, blah, blah, blah. We got to know each other through social media, started talking and everything. And then over time, maybe 2 or 3 years later, we started making things a little more serious because we already had a friendship. Eventually, I decided to tell her how I felt and everything." The interviewer says, "So you became boyfriend and girlfriend? Were you together for a while, or was it more of an on and off relationship with arguments?" Francisco said, "We actually lived together. She lived with her friends and everything. Like I said, I met her in 2021. Around 2024 was when things between us became more serious. She lived with her friends, and then she moved in with another friend who lived closer to where I lived. And afterward, she moved in with me. We lived together. Later, things didn't work out between us. That's normal in any relationship. I think every couple has problems, whatever they may be. We broke up, and from January until April, I didn't know anything about her. We broke up in January, and I saw her again in April 2025 at the festivities in Tepa. We ran into each other there and started communicating again. We talked, and there were intimate things between us at that time, and then afterward, Valyria was murdered." The interviewer says, "At some point in 2025, Valyria posted videos where she talked about you being jealous, about you having her removed from a place. Those are the kinds of things people are now connecting to the homicide. Was the relationship sometimes like that, with jealousy?" Francisco says, "Yes, like I said, we had relationship problems. When the nightclub incident happened, the posts that she made, I believe it was a Saturday, that day we broke up. What we agreed on as a couple was basically, you go your way, I'll go mine. If we happened to be at the same place, if I was there first, she would avoid it, and vice versa. If she was somewhere, I would stay away so we wouldn't make each other uncomfortable. So I happened to be at that place first, and then she arrived. We started arguing inside the nightclub. After she left, I saw the posts she made. I didn't think much of it. I thought it was a reaction out of jealousy. I never expected something like this to happen." The interviewer says, "You saw it as someone who was angry in the moment." Francisco said, "Exactly. And she was always involved with social media. Honestly, I've almost never liked social media. She did that. She exposed me that way. I saw it later the next day and thought, well, that happened. We talked things over and got back on good terms, basically like, let's stop bothering each other. You do your thing, I'll do mine, blah, blah, blah. I never expected something like this to happen." The interviewer says, when you broke up, I understand you broke up, saw each other again, and then separated again. But did you end things particularly badly or on a bad note? Francisco says, no, not at all. After those posts she made, we saw each other again. That's when we made peace in the best possible way. Then we ran into each other during the Tepa festivities, what they call Tepa Abril at the Palenque. It's like a concert. Then we ran into each other there. We saw each other again. In fact, one night she stayed with me at the hotel across from the fair. Everything was normal. We continued having some communication. We possibly had plans to try again if it happened. But yes, we were communicating again. The interviewer says, before we get to what happened to Valyria, there are two contexts that put you in the situation you're in right now: Valyria and your father. Did Valyria know about your father? Did she know who your father was? Did she know about the entire situation? Francisco answers, everything. Everything. She spent time with my family. She knew them, just like I spent time with her family. She attended family parties. She even attended one of my father's birthday celebrations. We spent a lot of time together. We were living together. It was already a stable relationship. We had a lot of plans. Like I said, we broke up. I never expected the tragedy that happened. To this day, it honestly hurts because she was someone I loved very much. We had a lot of plans and projects ahead of us. But again, I have absolutely nothing to do with what happened to her. Both of us spent time with each other's families. Our families knew each other, and she knew perfectly well about my family. The interviewer says, and in your family, let's say your father was involved in what he was involved in. Did you grow up in that context? Were you born in that environment? Meaning, context of like what your dad did. I'm trying to understand whether it wasn't necessarily a situation where he said, let me bring my son into what I'm doing. Were you involved with him or separate from that? Francisco says, no, not at all. I was not involved in that, not at all. And my father never got involved in our intimate personal matters. As a father, if I introduced him to a woman I was with, it was simply, this is my son's woman. He didn't give opinions or talk about whether he approved of something. He simply accepted it, and that was it. The interviewer says, did growing up with your father ever cause you problems or fear that something could happen to him? Like what ultimately happened when he was arrested? Francisco says, no. We always spent time together, but in a healthy way. I don't really want to talk in depth about personal matters involving my family. I'd rather talk about my situation and the fact that I believe I'm being accused unfairly. With my father and my entire family, we simply interacted as a family. That's it. The interviewer said, I'm asking you because those are the two things people are trying to mix together in your case: your father's activities and arrest, and Valyria's murder. Those two things make people see you as someone you might not actually be. You are not your father at the end of the day. Francisco says, but he's being accused too. I don't understand how they can accuse us in such a way and say he asked his father to do him the favor. What evidence is there? Was the person making that statement present when I supposedly asked for that favor? Of course not. If I'm not guilty and I'm innocent in this matter, then of course my father is innocent of this too. He wasn't involved in any of that. To begin with, I never asked him for that favor. Never. I didn't talk to him about my intimate or personal matters. Like I said, if I showed up as his son and said, she's my woman, my girlfriend, however I introduced her, it was simply okay, and that was it. The interviewer says, and the day this happened, Francisco, how did you find out? What were you doing that day? Francisco says, I had an apartment that I rented at Real Center in the towers there. I was there when a female friend called me. She said, hey, how are you? I hadn't spoken to this friend in a while. We greeted each other, and then she said, hey, this is happening. She told me I went into Valyria's live stream and she was shot. I said, but I'm right here nearby. The interviewer says, you were close to where it happened. Francisco says, of course. People who know the area know Real Center is there, and a few blocks away is the salon that she owned. So I told her, I'm right here. I don't hear anything strange. Everything seems normal. And that day, I had actually been talking to Valyria on that day. Hours before I was communicating with her, I had passed by there because there's a barbershop next to her business. I was going to get my hair cut, but I think they didn't have time. The guys there were busy or something. I don't know. Anyway, I left. I saw her there. I didn't say hello or anything. I simply saw her as I passed by. I continued on and I was talking to her. And that should be part of the evidence in the investigation. The government should have that. They can say, here are the cameras, here was the communication at the time. From what I understand, her phones were turned over. So they know perfectly well that I was communicating with her that day, the day this happened. They have to know the truth. They have her devices, from what I heard. The interviewer says, so your friend tells you this happened. You say you don't hear anything. What happened after that? Francisco said, I left my apartment. Later, I left my apartment and drove by there. The ambulances were already there. They were putting up the yellow tape. That can also be verified in an investigation. It's very easy to corroborate. Yes, I went to look, but I didn't get out of the car. I simply drove past and saw everything. At that point, there was already a social media lynching against me because it happened live. People were already attacking me on my social media. I've never been someone who posts my personal business. People started sending me messages, insulting me, disrespecting me, asking me why I did it. Then that's when I started feeling attacked. It was uncomfortable. I'd never experienced anything like that. Eventually, I chose to shut down my social media for a while. I kept to myself for some time, both to protect my grief and my image. You never expect something like that, especially involving someone you truly cared about. The day it happened, I even wrote to her father. I apologized for not being present at the wake or funeral, but I explained that I was facing so much public backlash and attacks that I didn't think it would be a good idea for me to appear somewhere like that and potentially be attacked. It was extremely difficult, and I'm still going through it today. I feel a lot of helplessness right now. I'm afraid because of the accusations being made directly against me. A judge hasn't declared this against me or someone with the authority to determine whether I'm guilty or not, but I'm being attacked from every direction. The interviewer says, after Valyria's murder, did you ever think about who could have done it? Do you have any idea? Francisco says, no, I have no idea. It's a feeling of helplessness, not being able to do anything. You ask yourself, why does this happen? Who did it? Why did they do it? And on top of that, I'm being accused. It's extremely difficult. There are so many questions you ask yourself, even today, but I don't know who did it or why. The interviewer says one of the things most discussed on social media, along with the accusations against you, was the friend's behavior. People thought the friend behaved suspiciously. Valyria can be heard on the live stream saying she wants to leave and close the salon. And then the friend tells her, wait, they're bringing you something, they're bringing you something. And then what happened, happened. Do you know whether she had anything to do with it? What do you think about that version of events? Francisco says, I don't know. I'm not the person to judge or blame anyone. I don't know whether she had anything to do with it, or whether the other friend who was there did. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not the one to judge or determine whether they're guilty. But during the time I was with Valyria, because of jealousy or whatever you want to call it, she did stop speaking to certain friends. One of them was that person who was there. So while I was in a relationship with Valyria, they weren't communicating. Because of that, I didn't spend time with that person enough to know her or determine anything about her. After Valyria and I separated, they became friends again. So I don't know what they experienced together or what they shared. The interviewer says, then your father, he was arrested. How did you find out? Francisco said, my family started asking what was happening. We started watching the news. Everyone was wondering what was going on. That's how I found out that he had been arrested, through the news. The interviewer said, they talked about a shootout. It was portrayed as a major operation. Francisco says, yes, I literally found out once all of that happened through the news. That's when I knew 100% what had happened. The interviewer said, did that frighten you even more? And Francisco said, it hurt me tremendously as his son. At first, it didn't frighten me because I didn't think it would bring all the accusations against me back again. But when that started happening, it became okay, what do I do? The interviewer says, then Secretary Omar Garcia Harfuch appears at the press conference. He asked about the successor to R1, and he responds very plainly R2. Then he says, I don't remember whether he said they're investigating or that they have information, but he mentions you and says R1's son is connected to Valyria Marquez's murder. How did you find out? Did someone send you the video? Francisco said, it showed up on my social media. That clip went extremely viral. A lot of friends started sending it to me saying, look, they're accusing you of this. Again, it's an incredible feeling of helplessness, not being able to do anything. That's why I think I'm daring to have this conversation now. It's one thing for people on social media to say, oh, it was the ex-boyfriend or whatever. It's another thing for the Secretary of Security to say it. Imagine that. Again, the helplessness of not being able to do anything. With all due respect to him, how does he determine an accusation like that when it's affecting my integrity both physically and socially? He's fucking me over, basically, with an accusation like that. He said it as though I had asked my father to do me a favor. Was he there during that conversation? Did he hear it? Who is willing to say that it literally happened the way he presented it? If I'm innocent of something as unjust as what happened to her, then logically my father is innocent of that too. He has nothing to do with it. The interviewer says, because they're connecting both of you, the accusations against both of you and your father ultimately come back to that homicide. Francisco says, yes, of course, but we have nothing to do with it. I truly believe in trust, and I still have hope as a citizen that the authorities will thoroughly investigate the entire case. They'll realize I'm innocent and that everything I'm being accused of is a lie. The interviewer says, Francisco, if you were investigating this yourself, what would you look at to demonstrate your innocence? Francisco says, I had a very good relationship even with her family. There was never any aggression toward her. Never. Quite the opposite. We helped each other in every way. From my perspective, it was always something healthy. Like I said, it's normal for couples to have arguments and problems. Those problems were why we decided not to stay together. But I think there's no better investigation than looking at her phones. I believe the government has her phones. They can see that I had nothing to do with it. They can see that I spoke to her that day. They could request the hotel cameras from the Tepa festivities and see that she slept there with me. There are many things showing there's no reason to accuse me in this way. The interviewer says, has the actual gunman, the person who pulled the trigger, been arrested? Francisco says, I saw that they arrested someone they say was involved, but I don't know whether he was involved or not. But if he was involved, ask him whether if he knows me. Have him identify me somehow. Have him give physical characteristics or anything else that actually implicates me as responsible or as an accomplice. The interviewer says, how did your life change? What was your life like before compared with today? Francisco said, when it happened, I think I withdrew from everything for maybe a month because of my grief and other personal things. Afterward, I continued living my normal life. The interviewer said, what does normal mean? Francisco said, I was studying at the Autónoma. I studied at UAG. Previously, I was also playing soccer. I exercised, did my normal daily activities. I'd go to restaurants occasionally. I'd go to clubs. I continued living my normal life without any problems until this accusation happened. The interviewer said, the same day you were accused, did you think, I have to leave? I can't continue living my normal life? Francisco said, no, not that same day. Later, they started labeling me as a fugitive. Once people started attacking me heavily, I isolated myself somewhat from my life. I've had to deprive myself of many things because of the fear I mentioned. Honestly, I'm afraid that they'll pin a crime on me that I didn't commit. A murder. That's an extremely serious crime. I'm afraid they'll unjustly pin that on me. That I'll suddenly go to a shopping center or somewhere and some police officer will stop me and, like usually happens in these cases, they'll plant a gun or rugs on me and even when I don't have anything. And from there, they'll use that to go after me for what they want to establish regarding this extremely serious case that's still open. The interviewer says, "Why do you think they're accusing you? What's your theory about why you?" Francisco said, "I don't like getting involved in politics very much. I don't know much about politics. I'd be lying if I told you otherwise. But I think a lot of this is political. Why? Because the government has already made its statements. They arrested my father, and they're also accusing him of the murder of Carlos Manso. In my opinion, they're accusing him unjustly because there's no accusation against him. And I think that's why they also brought Valyria's case into it, to hurt him. Why do I say that? Maybe they're not trying to hurt me. Maybe they're trying to hurt him. But more than anything, they've already made a statement that the government can't take back now. I think that when the government has a case, they want to close it as quickly as possible. So maybe this is the hook they are using. I'm not saying definitively whether my father is guilty or innocent. I'm not the one who determines that. A judge determines that. But they should thoroughly investigate everything. If he isn't guilty, then he should be released. This is all extremely high profile. From my point of view, these are political matters. Because these cases are so high profile, they want to close these extremely serious and major cases." The interviewer says, "Why did you decide to speak? What went through your mind that made you decide I have to come forward and show my face?" Francisco says, "Because I'm protecting my image. I can't stay silent forever and wait for a tragedy to happen to me. Like I mentioned, being stopped, having guns or rugs planted on me, being taken to jail, and then having this extremely serious crime involving Valyria pinned on me. And I know all of that could potentially hurt my father in his case as well. I'm doing this now because I want to show my face to the public. I want people to know the other side of the story, which is the real one. I want to expose what's being done against me. I can't remain silent forever and just wait for something to happen when there's no justification for it." The interviewer said, "Do you feel like they're going to arrest you?" Francisco said, "Yes, I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid that at some point they'll arrest me and I'll have to pay for something I didn't do. I think that's the most unjust thing. But again, I have a lot of faith in the authorities. I hope they get to the bottom of the investigation and they'll realize I bear no responsibility whatsoever. I'm completely innocent in this case." The interviewer said, "Is there a message you would like to give to Valyria's family, the public, the authorities?" Francisco said, "Regarding her family, I made the mistake of distancing myself from them. I'd like to be able to speak with them someday. I know they might see this conversation we're having. The reason I distanced myself somewhat, or perhaps didn't reach out to them, was because of all the public attacks I was receiving. I was afraid they might change their perspective of me and that I might face rejection or insults from them. I don't know. There were a lot of things going through my mind, so I never worked up the courage. But yes, I would like to speak with them. And as for the public, I'm not asking people to believe me. I'm simply telling what really happened. I'm also showing my face and trying to expose some of what's being alleged against me, because there's nothing pleasant about everyone looking at you like you're already a murderer. A murderer, imagine that. Imagine what my mother is going through. Imagine what my father is going through, and they're hearing about everything they're pinning on me. Or imagine him waiting for something to happen to me and being unable to do anything. It's really fucking me up psychologically. Again, I feel an enormous amount of helplessness, not being able to do anything. Just sitting here waiting to see what happens in the coming days and what solution there will be to all of this." The interviewer asks him, "Did you ever think about turning yourself in, saying, 'I'll go turn myself in and let them see'?" Francisco says, "No, not at all. I haven't thought about turning myself in because I haven't committed any crime." The interviewer says, "Or just going in to clarify things, to present yourself?" Francisco said, "Yeah, if a judge contacts me, of course, I can go give a statement. I'm open to that. I have no reason to refuse. I'm innocent of this. If they ask me to come in and give my statement before a judge or wherever I'm actually supposed to go, I have no reason to refuse. I'm willing to go give a statement." The interviewer says, "Thank you for your time, Francisco. Truly, the point is to seek out the news and the information from the source, not from the outside, but from people involved. That's ultimately what this is about. Thank you." Francisco said, "No, thank you, and hopefully this can be resolved. I trust all the authorities to get to the bottom of the investigation."